Good evening. Good evening. Thank you for joining us. We are thrilled this evening to bring a very special program. My name is Renee Battle Brooks. I am the Executive Director of the Prince George's County Office of Human Rights. We are the county's civil and human rights education and enforcement agency. Before I tell you a little bit more about us, I also am thrilled to introduce our co-host, Tanya. Tanya Lennox is from the EEOC, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, and partnership tonight. Tanya currently serves as the Outreach and Education Coordinator for the Philadelphia Field Office for the EEOC. The Office of Human Rights is celebrating our 51st year. We work to end discrimination in Prince George's County and the region. We do this by investigating complaints of discrimination. We combat human trafficking. We ensure equal access to county government services for all people in the language of their choosing, and by building community through our public outreach efforts. So as I said, tonight we are thrilled with our event partner, the EEOC, in bringing this very special event for AAPI Heritage Month. We are celebrating AAPI Achievement. We recognize that the contributions of Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders to this country and the world are beyond measure. Art, literature, science, innovation, healing, teaching, music, civic engagement, and so much more have been made richer through the creativity and efforts of our AAIP brothers and sisters. So again, I welcome Tanya Lennox. So a little bit about the format this evening. We are going to bring each of our special guests up individually first, and then we're going to bring everyone together and we're going to have just an organic conversation. So to start with, we are going to first introduce Dr. Esther Castillo. And before I do that, Tanya, I didn't give you an opportunity to say hi.
Thank you, Renee. It's my pleasure to be here. As you stated, I'm with the United States Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, the Philadelphia district, because we do have 3 other field offices under our district. But thank you so much for having me.
And thank you. And thank you for correcting. It's always important to get it correct. So Dr. Esther Castillo is a DEI practitioner, that's diversity, equity, inclusion, community builder, storyteller, advocate working to promote racial justice, health equity, and mental health in communities of color and immigrant communities. Her cross-sector collaborative work with community-based organizations, health agencies, and government departments was pivotal in the success of one of the most effective COVID-19 vaccine equity campaigns in Philadelphia, which removed vaccine barriers for immigrants with limited English proficiency and helped over 5,000 immigrant residents get vaccinated. As a Chinese American woman, Dr. Castillo has been a strong advocate and community leader against anti-Asian hate in Philadelphia. Currently, she is the Director of Racial Equity, Storytelling, and Community Impact at the Office of Community Empowerment and Opportunity in the city of Philadelphia, where she leads the integration of racial equity into governmental operations and community engagement. And so I know that Kyla is working behind scenes, trying to bring Dr. Esther up. So thank you. Welcome. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So I don't know, Tanya, do you want to start off with some questions for Dr. Esther?
First of all, Esther, I want to say that I know when I first met you, you worked for the Philadelphia Chinatown Development Corporation. And now I see you as an executive director. And I also want to ask you about some of your achievement. But first of all, I want to ask you, what does it mean to you to be in this role that you currently have right now? Tell us about that role.
First of all, it means a lot to me. I think I feel very grateful and privileged to be given the opportunity to serve the city of Philadelphia. I think there is so much desire in our city to think about how we can better integrate racial equity into government at this moment. So I think this is a great timing to be doing governmental work, specifically with the equity focused. What does it mean for me to be in this role? My role is both internal and external, and is very cross-functional because it is our office's vision to make sure racial equity is not something that is additional to what we do, but is the center of every decision that we make. And I know it sounds like a very lofty thing. It is a high bar, but I think with time and collaboration and patience and effort, I think it is possible. There are a lot of racial equity leaders, not just in my office in Philadelphia, but also in other city departments who are leading this pivotal work of thinking about how to integrate racial equity, not just from internally, from a training perspective, and also from a DEI workplace perspective, but also thinking about how we can create this innovative partnership to make resources and communications more accessible for the diverse communities that we're serving in Philadelphia.
Okay. Well, thank you, Esther. But also, I know you talked about an award-winning documentary, I know, calling Feeling Asian American. Tell us about that and tell you how you had that opportunity. I love the title, by the way.
Yeah, so there were a lot of things that were happening since we last talked, Tanya. I know last time when we talked, I didn't have this government role, and I was working in a nonprofit. But I think at that time we were doing a lot of things because there were a lot of things that were happening in the Asian immigrant communities in Philadelphia. In addition to the vaccine equity work, many of you know that there is this rise of anti-Asian hate and anti-Asian attacks that were happening nationwide, not just in Philly, but it was really felt in the Chinatown community and the Asian immigrant communities that we were serving at that moment. And I remember one night, a friend reached out to me. She is in the film industry, and then she said that she knows that Doc Society, Doc standing for like documentary, was organizing this pitch competition in Philadelphia. I think it's called Good Pitch Local. And then she encouraged me to apply to be part of the pitch competition. And it was kind of funny because I was thinking to myself that I am not a filmmaker. I work in a nonprofit. I'm a community organizer. Like, how is it related to me? But then she was very persistent. She was very assertive. She was like, you have to do this. You have to do this. So literally about 2 hours before the deadline, I was like, you know what? I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm going to listen to my friend and I'm going to give it a shot. So I apply to pitch an idea of a documentary. Because at that time, I organized a racial healing group in the summer of, trying to remember, 2021. Yeah, it's been 2 years now. So in the summer of 2021, after the Atlanta shooting happened, it was not, the racial healing group was not so much of a reaction towards what happened in Atlanta, but it was already in the making because there was this need from our community to create space for Asian Americans to talk about how we experience racism in a very unique way. I think for a very long time, race and racism has been a black and white issues in America, or at least is presented that way. I think Asian Americans have a very specific position when it comes to the way we experience racism. That is not often talked about because we haven't really made space for ourselves to reflect on those issues in a meaningful way. And so it was really my desire to create a space for people to talk about their specific experience, not to compare, but really to dig deep into ourselves to make sure we understand what is happening to us. Because to me, it is very clear that if we don't do the internal work of healing ourselves, then it becomes very hard for us to show up for other communities of color and to fight for racial equity, if we don't really make space to heal ourselves and to understand what we're facing. So in 2021 summer, we put together a racial healing group. It was a 12-week program. We meet every other week. It was totally on Zoom because of COVID. And I was partnering with a licensed psychologist. At that time, he was working at Penn. And then we put together this very specific curriculum with different steps of really thinking about our racial identity and what's going on in the country, and some of the racial trauma that we have experienced. And a lot of folks who come out of that group said that it was a very transformative experience for myself too, because it is very, very rare for me to be in a space with other Asian folks where I feel like I could be vulnerable and could be honest about some of the hurt and pain and the struggle that I have faced as an Asian American person. And that space was very welcoming. It was very, it was community in as we build it. I know it's on Zoom, and then so the documentary was kind of like a way to tell the story of that racial healing group that happened, and it was very interesting. So we pitched. I pitched at the competition, and won $5,000 to create the documentary. It is a very, very small grant. I was kind of joking, well, $5,000. What can we do about this, right? And it was almost as if the stars have aligned in the universe, because I told my folks from the racial healing group that, hey, I got this grant dollars, and some folks who are in filmmaking industry want to support us, but we don't have enough funding. We need to find a director, because I'm not a director. I'm not a filmmaker. So one of the participants of the racial healing group in Harrisburg, one day she was, I'm not really, I didn't make it up. It sounds so wild. It sounds like I made this up, but I didn't make it up. She was walking her dog, and then started talking to her neighbor who also walked the dog in the same parking lot. And he turned out to be a producer based in New York.
Wow.
No, you're making that up, Esther.
Yeah.
Wow. The stars really did align, huh?
It did. And more so, he know this producer from Sesame Street, who was at that time producing a program specifically around race and racism. I forgot the title of the particular series, but there was Asian American Muppet that came out as a result of,
How
of
creative.
that project. I don't know if you remember her. The Muppet's name is Ji Young. And it was the first Asian American Muppet in the history of Sesame Street. And somehow he know the producer of that particular project. And then we had a meeting. I told her my idea. She was like, I want to do this. Let's do this. And so then I think it was like 8 months later, we have a documentary. And the documentary is making its rounds in different film festivals across the country. We got invited by the Asian American Film Fest in Chicago. We'll have our premiere in New York in June. And we just won Audience Choice Award in Asian American based film festival in Oregon. So we feel very, very proud of this project.
Wow.
I think it was also during that time I was approached by somebody to take on this new role in the city government. So I think at that time, it just feels like there is a lot of desire coming from me personally to make a larger impact, because I feel very proud to be Asian American. I feel very passionate serving the Asian American community, but also during this time and for a very long time, it is very, very important for me to build bridges across different communities of color. I think it is in my blood because I am multiracial. My dad is partially Nicaraguan, so I have Latinx blood in me, and so like growing up, I have often I am already bicultural, if not multicultural. Like my dad's family has so many people from different backgrounds, all kinds of backgrounds. My aunt jokes about how our family looks like the United Nations. And also growing up in a small peninsula, Macau, which is right next to Hong Kong, was a Portuguese colony for over 500 years. So moving to America when I was 19 years old, just a lot of these experiences kind of built up me as a person who is multicultural from my core. And I have this innate desire to unite different communities, especially communities of color. I think my experience as a woman of color really solidified, I also have this core value of justice. Since I was very little, I've always been those kids who was like, this is not fair. I feel like everything just kind of aligned.
I'm gonna ask you more about that
for
now, but thank you so much, Esther. And I'm gonna turn it over to you, Renee.
Thank you. That I've got a lot of questions as well, but we're going to do that. So this has been really good. So yes, I hope we have time. Thank you so much, Esther. So what we're going to do next is bring our next guest, but you're not off the hook because I've got more for you. So thank you. We're going to next bring Katsura Kurita. She was appointed as Coppin State University's inaugural Title IX coordinator within the Office of the President in September 2021. She is responsible for providing leadership, vision, strategic planning, oversight, compliance with the Title IX education amendments of the 1972, the Violence Against Women Act reauthorization of 2013, the Campus Sexual Violence Elimination Act, and other related federal and state laws across the university. She is committed to ensuring an inclusive learning, living, and work environment that is free from harassment and discrimination for all members of the campus community. Prior to her appointment at Coppin State, Ms. Kurita worked as the Assistant Vice President for Student Development at Loyola University of Maryland, where she also served as the Title IX Deputy for Students and the university's 504 ADA Compliance Officer. I hope I said that right. Ms. Kurita brings over 20 years of professional experience in a variety of positions within student affairs. She has worked as the Associate Dean for Students at the Johns Hopkins University Peabody Institute, Director of Judicial Affairs and Mediation Services at American University in Washington, D.C., and Assistant Dean of Students in Student Conduct Administration at the State University of New York College at Oswego. Did I pronounce that right? Okay.
Oswego.
Thank you. Don't tell the New Yorkers that I didn't know. Ms. Kurita received a bachelor's degree from Smith College and completed her master's degree in multicultural counseling from Syracuse University School of Education and a Juris Doctor from Syracuse University College of Law simultaneously. So thank you so much for joining us. And Tanya, I'm going to give this to you.
Okay, thank you so much, Renee. Katsura, it's such a pleasure to see you again. Please take this opportunity and tell everyone about you and tell what your journey is, and I would love to hear it.
Thank you so much, Tanya. And thank you, Renee. I'm really grateful to be here for this opportunity and honored to be present here with the other distinguished panelists. here. And I want to start by acknowledging and recognizing that there are many outstanding Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders within our communities and even within our families. And I wanted to make sure that while I am one voice today, I hope that we take the opportunity to acknowledge and recognize the many accomplishments and successes of our ancestors who came before us and those Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders who will come after us as well. I thought I would just start by sharing a little bit about my personal background and what's really inspired me to do the work that I do in the Title IX office at Coppin State University. I'm going to start a little bit about what my name is and what that means to me. And I often think that a name has a lot of meaning, and you can tell a lot about a person by their name. So my name is Japanese, and Kurita is actually chestnut patty in Japanese. And so long ago, I am assuming that many of my family were chestnut farmers. And my first name, Katsura, I was named after the river that flows in Kobe, where my father was born. And so that's where my name comes from. But the name Katsura also means wig in a different capacity in Japanese. So there's just some funny things about that as well. As you could tell, my parents were born and raised in Kobe, Japan. My parents had an arranged marriage. So when my mother went to her wedding in the United States in Los Angeles, she did not know one person at her wedding. My parents had met a few times before she came to the United States, but really, she didn't really know anybody. Both my parents were educated and went to college in Japan. And my mother actually was an English major and studied there and then came to the United States. Her reading was and writing were very good, but her speaking was always very challenging for her. So I can just imagine, how it must have been like to come to a whole new country to start a life with a person she barely knows. My father worked for the Panasonic Corporation, which at that time was establishing all these different offices all across the United States and in Canada and in South America as well. So as a child, I moved around quite a lot. And I was always the new kid. I always felt different and people made fun of me. I never fit in and I was always feeling alone because there was not anybody who looked like me in the places where I was growing up. But the one person who really lifted me up, gave me confidence, encouraged me, believed in me was my mother. She created that safe space and taught me that I was good enough, that I was strong enough, that I was smart enough to do whatever I wanted to do. And so she really was my inspiration. After I graduated from college, I went to law school, where I did a joint degree in law and counseling. I felt that when I was in law school, there just wasn't enough opportunity for me to learn the people skills that I really needed to help clients who might be going through some really stressful situations. I later found out that that didn't really mix well, law and counseling. So I found a different way to apply that in a higher education setting where I was able to do student discipline where I can combine both of those two skills and really help students learn and grow from the mistakes that they made. So that was really a wonderful experience for me over the years and in my career in higher education. Now, as the Title IX coordinator at Coppin State University, which is a historically Black college and university in Baltimore, it is also one of the 12 universities that's connected with the University System of Maryland institutions. My role is to support students and employees who have experienced sexual assault, dating, domestic violence, stalking, and other forms of sexual misconduct. What I wanted to do was really create that safe space, like my mother did for me when I was growing up, where every person is treated with respect, dignity, and sensitivity. when a person goes through a traumatic experience like a sex.
I'm so sorry. You
Katsura.
just muted yourself, right? We heard the end of what Title IX is, sexual assault, and your mother taught you, and
Terrific. So sorry about that.
no worries.
So what I wanted to do was create a space, a safe space, like my mother created for me, where every person who would be treated with sensitivity, respect, and dignity. So when a person goes through a very traumatic incident like a sexual assault, it's really important that they feel supported and are provided resources and information about healthcare options, mental health providers, both on and off campus, reporting options to law enforcement, and working through reporting and going through grievance procedures, whether that's on campus or through the criminal court systems. I want to really make sure that students and employees continue to do well while they're going through these particularly difficult situations, and that they're supported in an environment that's safe and that's discrimination free, so that they can live, work, and learn in an environment that's conducive to their growth and development. I think that the number one reason why individuals do not report sexual violence is a fear that they would not be believed. And the goal for the Title IX office at Coppin State University is for every person to feel comfortable, where they will feel that they are not alone, and where they are able to be connected to resources and empowered to make their own decisions about what they would like to do in their particular case. We do not force anybody to make a decision about anything that they are going through. We just really want them to be safe and healthy and well. So for every person who comes to the Title IX office at Coppin State, they will be treated with fairness, respect, and kindness. And this is a message I really wanted to share with students and employees, is that that the Title IX office, when you come to us, we will hear you because we listen. We will that every person will feel like they're valued because everybody matters, and that they will always be welcomed because they are worth it. And I just really appreciate this opportunity to talk about my work and the inspiration behind the work that I do at Coppin State University.
That was beautiful. Thank you. I think that the theme, universal, viewed and heard and seen. I wonder if you could unpack just a little bit, because I think for those listening, there may be something that they can also grasp. When you talked about sort of moving around to these different countries and always being the new girl and not seeing anybody that looks like you or has your experience, just unpack that, if you could, a little bit about maybe how you coped with that or what that looks like. There may be something here for somebody to really be able to grab and to take.
That's really important. People always say, okay, where do you feel most at home? And I will always say, wherever my mother is. So she could be in Japan, she could be in California or Canada or Puerto Rico or any other states where we have lived. And I will never say a location is where it's home. It's really where my family is. And so I think many of us probably have a similar experience in that. And so that's really where I take away, trying to recreate that safe environment wherever I am, no matter where I am and with whomever I am with. And so that's what I hope that I offer to the students and employees at Coppin State University or any of the other institutions that I've worked at in the past.
Can I just tell you that for me, that resonated only because I too have lived in a lot of different countries, and there was never anyone that looked like me or had that same experience. And I have that very same thing, Katsura. When people ask, where am I from? I mean, I'm American. My parents are Americans, but I wasn't born in this country. So we have, but the moving around, and I always say, I'm not from anywhere, but I am home. It is where my family is. Wherever my family is where. So you know what? Thank you. You're the only other person outside of my family that has ever said the same thing. So for you, it's your mother. For me, I mean, it's the same sentiment. Wherever the family is, the core family. Ah, okay. It was for all of us. Thank you. I don't know if anybody else, but awesome. So, Tanya, while I'm reading some directions here, if you have a question for Katsura,
no, I would just ask Katsura because we talked about, my background, of, being raised in the South Pacific Islands. The Japanese influence was so dominant in the Micronesian Islands and the island where I grew up. And so, when I see people like yourself and others, I feel like I'm bumping into myself because of that experience. So what would you tell Katsura, your younger self, about what she will expect and where you are today?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say that it's important to experience all you can experience, to be true to yourself, to say it's okay to be different, that there's a piece that's unique about you that could be valued by somebody else, and that you can find something unique in somebody else that you value, so that it's always a two-way street. You're never alone, and that you just need to find bridges and connections and ways in which we can learn from each other, about each other, and that there's an importance in finding those particular, pieces, and that it's really important. And it doesn't really matter whether you are coming from an Asian background or any other type of background, because there's pieces that we can all learn from each other. And I think that that's what makes it such a unique experience. And that, as you know, Tanya, living in different areas and experiencing different cultures and looking different in that particular culture, you have to sort of blend. You have to sort of find a way in which you can relate, maybe not with a physical appearance, but with, things that you share in common and what you value and trust and building relationships and all of those important factors, which I think are very, very important.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Katsura. Renee?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask another question. It's really in this same vein. For you, this is not going to be a problem, right? But so you are at a historic HBCU, right? But
Yes.
You have moved in and out of different cultures and countries. But for somebody, right? So this is drilling a little bit deeper now. For somebody who has not sort of gotten outside of their space or
Yes.
or their culture or an environment where everybody looks like them, what are the two key things that you could give as advice? Like, how do you navigate? How do you, feel like you are part of a community?
It's really fascinating, because as and one of the few Asian people on an HBCU, I consider myself different, but I don't feel different on Coppin State University's campus. I feel very welcomed. I say hello to everybody, and they always say hello back. And I think the reason why everybody is so welcoming is that I offer myself to other people. I am open. I am transparent. I am approachable. I try to connect in a way that people try to, feel comfortable with me, especially when they're talking about very intimate and personal details of a very tragic situation. Mm-hmm. I try to build empathy and, show people that I care about them. I go to all of their, I have courtside seats for the basketball games, and I go to the softball games, and I go to the plays, and I go to the events where students are, and the, Greek, different activities that are going on. And I try to make myself available to students, to let them know that they can trust me and that they can come and get the help and support that they need to really be successful, because that's really what I want. I want students and employees to be successful at Coppin State University, thrive, and do wonderful work, both on campus and in our communities. And so I hope that I am able to do that within my environment.
No, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. And that transition. So what we're hearing is you have to be authentic. Like you have to show up as your person and your caring is real and that you get involved and you show interest. So I think those are such great life lessons that translate through anything. So thank you.
Thank you.
Like with Esther, I have lots of questions, but we want to wait till the end. So thank you so much, Katsura, just for sharing a snapshot and helping us celebrate your achievements and really giving us some really sound advice. So thank you. So we're going to see you in a minute, but we are next going to bring up our last fabulous guest and panel member, last but not least, our dear friend, Amy Jean Chung Fry, Esquire. She is Prince George's County own. We claim her. She is second generation Korean American. She serves as a council member for Ward 6 in the town of Cheverly. She was recently elected to her third term and was the first East Asian American to serve on the Cheverly Town Council. She currently serves as the Chief of Staff for County Council member Jolene Ivy of District 5. And prior to this career transition, she worked for Asian Americans Advancing Justice, AAJC. It is a national civil rights nonprofit focused on empowering the Asian American and Pacific Islander communities. Councilmember Fry is also a co-founder and president of the AAPI Democratic Club of Prince George's County, Maryland. And she works to establish an AAPI affinity group in the Maryland Municipal League. So Amy, we are thrilled to have you here today. So maybe to get started, we didn't get to ask Esther this, but that was one of my questions. We asked Katsura, but if you could, as we're celebrating achievements among other things that we're doing tonight. So tell us about your journey. You know, how did you come all this way to then be a county council member, right? And now chief of staff, right? There's so many wonderful things. A former business owner, like so many things. So help us celebrate you, Amy.
Well, firstly, thank you, Renee and Tanya, for having me here and just kind of sharing this space with the other panelists. I'm honored, and I always love working with you, Renee. So this is kind of an annual tradition. I'm hopefully that we can continue doing that. Firstly, let me go ahead and introduce myself too. My name is Amy Jean Chung Fry. I use she and her for pronouns. And I do want to acknowledge that I'm currently logging in to this virtual space from the native lands of the Piscataway and Anacostan tribes. And where I currently am was later then used as tobacco plantations where the enslavement of Black people occurred. And I like to do that acknowledgement because it's a very good reminder to myself of the lands on which I stand, the shoulders on which I stand, and kind of what really drives me to continue in the work that I do. I'm not going to go all the way back to when I was born, but I'll just start with when I got to DC. It was after law school. I was, wide-eyed and just ready to go and, wanted to pursue international policy. At the time, it was Sally Mae. So Aunt Sally came knocking on my door, said, "Hey, you got some money to pay me back?" So I started, just working in more of a big law environment, and then took some time off when I had kids. And so very grateful that I had the opportunity to do that. And I spent about 9 years or so at home, during which time was when I ran for council. I had like a small little business on the side making royal icing decorated cookies, which such a bizarre thing, but people love them. And, was doing fitness classes at the same time. So it was like, making my own clientele, right? Eat a cookie, come to my workout class. But an easy way to really get into the community, right? And I think that was what really drove me to run. I wasn't ever planning to go into politics or anything like that. It was a friend who said, "Hey, do you want to run for this seat? I'm going to run for something else." And I was like, "No way, that's, I don't want to do that." And then she was like, "Think about it." And ironically, that was about the time that I met County Councilmember Jolene Ivey. And she dropped a little nugget of truth with me saying, you know, on average, it takes a woman about 7 times to be asked to take a leadership position. And when you ask yourself, how many times does it take for a man to be asked? Usually they don't have to be asked. And that really kind of resonated with me. And, you know, granted, this is 2019, so 2016 had just happened. I think every day there was something new from that point where things were just really raw. There was a lot of emotion and a lot of frustration and a lot of fear. So, you know, that's kind of why I decided to run. It was like, you know, start local, ensure the community that I live in is a community I want my children to live in, that I want other people's children to live in. It's not just about my kids. It's about, you know, all of our community. And so that's how that started. Then I went back to work and I kind of pivoted. I went and was very fortunate to be able to start a position with Asian Americans Advancing Justice, AAJC. It's one of those, not ironic, but weird positions where I'm so grateful to be in the work. My position was an anti-hate program associate, but it was also so awful that there was even a position like this. So, you know, for about a year and a half, a little over a year and a half, that's where I was until an opportunity presented itself for me to then again kind of pivot again. And now I work with County Councilmember Jolene Ivey. I'm her chief of staff. And one of the reasons that I decided to do that pivot was when one of my mentors said to me, how many Asian Americans do you see in chief of staff positions nationwide, but let alone here in your county, in the state, and just think about the impacts you can make there. Go there, get some experience, see what you can do in your county. And then if you're ready to come back to nonprofit space, you know, it would be there for you. So that's kind of, you know, how I ended up here.
That's beautiful. Tanya, did you have a question? Because, you know, Renee will always have questions.
Well, yes, I understand. Amy, you know, it's such a pleasure to meet you. And I guess some of the things I look at you and I listen to your story and it's so inspiring. And what is something when a person that's meeting you for the first time, what is the most important thing that you want them to know about you and what you believe in?
I think I would say the biggest takeaway is that I care and that I try to be always authentic. In dealing, and especially, you know, in quote unquote politics, when you're working with community, sometimes you're doing things that not everybody agrees with, you know, but I like to try to be as honest as I can be, stating, you know, the reasons as why I'm making a certain decision or leaning a certain way. But I think at the end of the day, when they realize all of my decisions are driven by the fact that I care about my community and that I want what's best for my community, I think that's the one thing that I really want them to kind of walk away with.
And one other quick question, what would you tell young Asian girls that are, you know, living in these communities that are coming up, and what advice would you give these young women that they look at you as an example in their community? What would you like for them to know? What message would you tell them?
I would probably tell them to be bold and be loud. Growing up, I was not necessarily told to be loud. I think my parents have always encouraged me to be confident, to go out and do things. But my own personality, I hate public speaking. I have an anxiety for it. And while I like to make friends and I can be in conversation with people easily, being the center of attention is very hard. I think some of that could be cultural, but some of it's my personality. And so I try to encourage people just, you know, be bold. And when I see some of my younger colleagues I used to work with, you know, who are like 2 decades younger than me, and they know their voice, they're so strong in it, it really inspires me to try to be louder when I speak and feel okay to take up space, because so often I think we've just kind of been told as women, and that's not even a cultural thing. As women, take up the littlest amount of space as possible. So in that, I would say, no, take up space and be loud. Now, I won't say that to my daughter because in the house she's got it, but I do tell her that when she goes out into the world, I'm just like, hey, you need to be bold. You need to vocalize your opinion. If someone's bothering you, you need to be able to say, hey, I'm not comfortable with that, and not feel bad when you say something like that, because we all need to kind of maintain those boundaries.
That is very profound. Thank you, Amy. Renee?
No, that's great. Be bold and loud. One quick question before we bring everyone together. Tell our audience a little bit more about the Asian American Advancing Justice group, what this is, and because I think it's so important.
It is. Asian Americans Advancing Justice, AJC, is the national nonprofit. It's located in Washington, D.C. It is part of an affiliation with 4 other organizations in different places, but they all have different kind of missions, but work under like an umbrella. So what their goal is, and they've been around for, I think, over 30 years now, is really just to empower Asian American communities, but doing so kind of hand in hand with a lot of our, with the vision of cross-racial solidarity, and empower and working towards that together. So being in that organization in the time period when I was there, which was a little bit after the Atlanta spa murders, and then also the FedEx field murders in Indianapolis, it was very therapeutic for me in a way, because I was in a space where I felt comfortable, and every day I could come as authentic as I could be with all of my raw emotions, and work towards a common goal. And so with Asian Americans Advancing Justice, AJC, what they do is they work at it from a policy standpoint. There's also focusing on training, working with community organizations, and really trying to build out that network across the country, because that's one of the things I think we saw really coming out of this rise in attention of anti-Asian hate, because anti-Asian hate has always been there, but I think now that the world is kind of seeing it through a different lens, that it's getting more attention, it's getting more funding, because in the past, I think Asian American organizations got 0.02% of philanthropic funding. And so these awful things have led to more acknowledgement that it's happening. And so that's kind of, their mission. And I think it was 2022, they had a huge unity march on the National Mall, and it drew people from all over the country, just different speakers. And it was just very empowering. And it was really important just to hear the different stories from people who were had been victims of anti-Asian hate or police violence. And then just to be in solidarity with one another, because it was a bringing together of so many different groups. So yeah, I would definitely want to plug them. They have some good trainings that they also do with Right to Be in regards to street harassment. So yeah.
No, that is awesome. That's there's so much. And while Kyla's preparing to bring Esther and Katsura back, sorry. Solidarity, we can't speak enough about that. That feeling supported, it's huge. So thank you, Amy. We try to drag you in on as many events as we can, but
you don't let me here, so
yeah, this is great. So Esther, we didn't get to celebrate your story because we really got to learn all about the great stuff with the documentary and the work that you're doing in Philadelphia. But can you sketch for us and for any young person that is listening, or maybe not so young person that's looking to make a career change or just want to feel inspired, tell us about Dr. Esther Castillo and how she got to where she is.
I'll be real brief. I think my journey really started when I was 19 years old. I'm not gonna go all the way, but then the pivotal is a very pivotal moment because I moved to America, and I'm a first generation immigrant. English is my second language. I didn't grow up in America, and I think a lot of things that drive me to it, like my experience living in a colony, growing up in a colony. And I think that jump really was, I think it was like 3 years ago when I prior to me being in nonprofit space, I was in academia. I was pursuing an academic career as a professor. And at that time, I was experiencing a lot of microaggression. I just gave birth to my daughter. Now she's 7. And I was having really serious postpartum depression. I was hitting rock bottom. I was not well. And I think at that time, my best friend kind of looked at me and be like, hey, you need to go see a therapist. And I think that's why kind of I become really a strong advocate for mental health. That's kind of the reason why I moved into nonprofit space, kind of because I branched out to do something that gives me joy. That's really kind of how I started. I just decided that I'm going to reach out to people that makes me happy and be in space that gives me good energy. So I didn't have to be depressed at that time. That was just a very simple thing that I did. But the more I do it, the more people I met who moved me to the next thing, and then it's almost like I didn't really plan for it. I just kind of like did what gives me joy, did what drives me. That's pretty much it. And I hear that in both like Amy's story and Katsura's story, you know, it's just kind of like follow your heart. I know it's very cliche, but then that's pretty much what I did. It took me a very, very long time to realize that I don't need permission to do anything I want.
Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah. And, you know, I love that we are talking about validating mental health and reaching out, because it is taboo in so many of our cultures, and a sign of weakness or just tough it up or, you know, just right. So I love anytime we can elevate the message that it is okay to take care of yourself, and there's nothing wrong with seeking help and encouragement. So thank you for sharing that, Esther. I just want to ask a question actually to start us off, and it's really unpacking a little of what you said, Esther, when you talked about how, you know, the experiencing of racism in a unique way. And I think it's so important for our audience to understand that. Could each of you unpack that a little bit as you're comfortable, like, you know, help educate those of us that are listening? What does that mean?
Yeah, I think first of all, it is important to acknowledge that the AAPI population is very, very diverse. So I don't want to say that my personal experience with racism represent everybody in the AAPI community, not only because there are ethnic differences and immigration status differences, but also generational differences and linguistic differences. There are so many things. But I think one thing that is very poignant everywhere I go, because I also used to run a youth program focusing on mental health, best serving Asian American youth. One thing that I hear consistently all the time is that people feel like, including myself, feel like I'm not American enough or I'm not Asian enough. That is this in between space that we always have to exist, feeling that we're not enough all the time, is something that's very distinctly Asian American. That's kind of how I feel. And also navigating these like intergenerational trauma and understanding them, because a lot of us have ancestors who survived in wars, colonialism, imperialism. I think that part of history is not being talked about enough and is not being taught enough in schools. So not being able to understand those stories and having those histories erased is a violence that is done systemically to our community, and not having those wisdom to carry on to our generation makes us feel like it goes back to that point of belonging. I think Katsura talked about it too. Like, oh, I feel like I don't belong. I don't feel like I don't fit in. You know, that's very, very persistent in a lot of the people that I talk to.
Thank you, Katsura or Amy. Want to comment?
If I can just piggyback really quickly, you know, I totally agree with what Esther said. In the history books, the Japanese American internment is maybe a paragraph long. Right. And so we talk about slavery in the Black community and how that, you know, has really affected people in this day and age. But yet, you know, in the modern age, Japanese Americans were interned during World War II, and all their rights were taken away, and they were U.S. citizens, many of them.
Right.
And so I feel like that history is not shared enough. and people don't know what other people have gone through oppression and discrimination in this country, and what impact that may have for us if we don't, again, tell our stories and be bold, as Amy had said, and use our voice to make sure people understand our histories and the unique aspects of where we came from and where we want to go.
Yeah, thank you for that. And it is, every time I think about, like, 1941, 1945 was yesterday, really, if you think
Yes.
about how
Yeah.
fast. And you're so right. And we all have to work to correct that. We all have to work hard to get our history of America, because each of us are part of American history. And it is so, forgive the cliche, whitewashed, but it is, like, no pun intended, but yeah, anyway, sorry. So Amy.
So I just want to really co-sign everything that both, Dr. Castillo as well as Katsura said. And then I will just add, like, to that is that, it's this idea of the perpetual foreigner, right? That we're that you don't have that belonging. And should more of our history be included, I think it would provide a sense of acknowledgement of, yes, Asian Americans have suffered as well being in this country. They were brought over to do specific things. They were brought over to be a wedge and to help uphold white supremacy. And so I think those are the things that we have to think about. And, one of the things that I learned when I was at Advancing Justice AJC was we don't refer to Japanese internment as internment. We say it's incarceration, because that's what it was. It wasn't a camp. Okay? These people were not put in this place so that they could, enjoy, being outside, in little, like, makeshift cabins. This was where they were basically kidnapped into these spaces. And so I think it's really important. And I think we see that across all of our histories, in that we have to be very, very specific about the words that we use, because we really need to acknowledge of what happened to our communities. And so I think when we know that more, we have more compassion, we have more empathy for one another, and a little bit, I don't want to say we're bonding over these awful traumas, but in a way, it does provide that, because sometimes one of the hardest things about being Asian American is that we are often seen very white adjacent. And there are oftentimes we have that privilege, and it has served us well in many cases. So what we need to do as a community is to acknowledge that and to see where we can be better allies to other communities, and what we can do to uplift those voices, both within the Asian American community and beyond.
Wow. Yeah. Thank you so much for Amy for saying that. And I want to say this too. It was important that you said to people to be bold, because there's so many stereotypes with Asians that are so wrong. And a lot of times that's out of pure ignorance, and even violence against Asians is out of pure ignorance. And the only way that we defeat that is by educating and telling people the story, and not hiding it, and knowing where you're coming from and being proud of it. And I like for the fact that Katsura works at HBCU, but she's like, I'm not trying to be Black. I'm being Asian. I'm being who I am. And they accept her for that. That's right. And they have the utmost respect when you are who you are. And I just want to thank all of you for that. I've learned so much. I feel like I've taken a college course just listening to you ladies talk.
Yeah, no, it's been inspirational, and so many nuggets for life that, it's applicable, not just for women, not just for people of color, not right. It's so this is great. I do want to give the opportunity, Kyla, if there are any questions, maybe, and if not, that's okay, before we wrap up, from the audience. And okay, so okay, no questions, perfect. So I want to echo Tanya's sentiment. This has been wonderful. I think we could have done another hour, because I actually do have other questions, lots of questions, because I think we can learn a lot from Esther about the racial healing group, like how that translates across. So I may be calling you offline and picking your brain, and we have a lot to learn from what Katsura said about just how you navigate every situation and you're still yourself, right? And I think we have a lot to learn from Amy about just being bold,
Mhm.
following what following your passion and those opportunities, and listening when friends say, have you thought of, instead of saying absolutely not, right? So this has been really, really wonderful. So thank you, ladies. I hope this is not a one and done. And we at the Office of Human Rights, we like to stalk people once they have been, right? So please do not unfriend us or block us.
Oh, look, I've learned one thing from Esther is that there's no one and done. Just because it's the month of May, that's not where it ends.
Oh, no, right.
7,
Exactly.
365 days a year, right?
Right. Exactly. So we will be contacting you. So thank you for lending your time, your talent, your gifts, and just your insight. It's been really, really good. I want for those listening, just to briefly tell you what's happening later tomorrow. Tomorrow we are going to be live at the Greenbelt Library. Please, if you can come out, please come out and join us at 6 o'clock. We are partnering with WETA. That's one of our public TV entities here in Maryland, and with our library, the Prince George's County Prince George's County Memorial Library System. And we are going to be talking about the U.S. and the Holocaust. We're going to be looking at one of Ken Burns' part of his documentary, and then we're going to have a wonderful panel discussion with panelists to really talk about what we can do and what Americans, and really it's the same thing that we're talking about here, right? How are we stronger together? So Kyla's going to pull that event registration up so that we can look at that. And then please be sure to join us next Monday. We're going to do Celebrating Asian American Women in Business event. That is at 7 o'clock virtual. And then we are going to, on June 1st, have author Julia Lee, and she's going to be talking about the racial railroad. You don't want to miss that. That's virtual. That's, again, also 7 to 8 o'clock. So for all of our events, please go to civil rights at mypgc.us. You can learn more about our agency, but also go to our events tab, and you can see what's coming up. And most of our events are virtual, and they sit forever on YouTube, so you can watch and learn and figure things out with us as we are on this journey together. So thank you, Tanya. Thank you for joining us.
Quick shout out, June the 8th, I'm having a workshop on hiring initiatives. And look, we're tearing down paper ceilings. We want you to consider hiring people. This is Asian Pacific Island Month. We want you to consider hiring Asians that are well qualified in your business. And don't ask where you find them, because they're everywhere, okay? And I actually dropped the link in the chat. Thank you so much, Renee.
Thank you. And Amy, any last words? Anything you want to say? We're going to go round robin.
Last words. No, I don't think so. If you are in the county, there is an event that the AAPI Democratic Club is supporting that Councilmember Wanika Fisher is hosting with Lieutenant Governor Runa Miller, honoring one of the first Asian American legislators, David Valderrama. So that's on Thursday. But other than that, I guess what I would say is it is Mental Health Awareness Month. So I'm glad that we were able to talk about that. Also Jewish American Heritage Month as well. So just every day is a day that we should celebrate each other and ourselves. So I hope we can do that.
Thank you, Amy. Katsura.
I'm just grateful to be here with all of you. And I'm also proud that we will be celebrating a commencement on Friday at Coppin State University. And Governor Wes Moore will be our commencement speaker. And so we are very happy and proud of all those graduates. And so thank you so much for all your support and help.
Thank you. And Esther.
I just want to thank everybody. Thank you, Tanya. Thank you, Renee. Thank you, Amy and Katsura. And happy AAPI Heritage Month. And I just want to throw it out there. Please prioritize yourself, prioritize Asian joy. We deserve it. So that's all from me.
Exactly. Thank you. And thank you, audience, for tuning in. And we'll see you next time. Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening. Stay safe.
Yes, bye.